You might catch yourself sliding in and out of a hallucinatory state. Just relax and enjoy it. Just relax and enjoy it.
This is an experiment in mind formation. Information. Forming, controlling, operating your mind and your brain. We're using digital techniques to overload, scramble, confuse, unfocus your mind. The natural state of the brain is chaos. Chaos is beautiful.
Nicole Kerr, how are you?
I'm doing well today, Justin. How are you?
I am fantastic.
I love that answer.
my life is ruled by the F word.
No, there's several of those, remember.
Right. Fantastic in particular.
Okay, love it. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show.
Absolutely. Well, you just have such an interesting story that I just felt really compelled to talk to you. It's such a fascinating story, and the work that you're doing because of your journey is incredibly moving. And so I would just like to just get some background from you. Can you just tell people about yourself and a little bit about what you do, and then lay the full story on us? I'd love to hear it.
Sure. Well, I grew up in the South in Mississippi and the Bible Belt, so very religious, Southern Baptist and Lutheran. So had a dad who was in the military and wanted one of his children to go into the military. So I signed up for that duty because I was looking to be this people pleaser and wanted love and acceptance like all kids do from their parents. And I thought if I followed in his footsteps that I would get that. I was not military oriented at all in high school. In fact, I was a model and I did junior achievement and was not into varsity sports. So I definitely was not in the track to go to one of these military academies. I was accepted. I was in the 6th class of females. They admitted females back in 1976. So my class was the 6th class. And that is an identity that was formed early in my life, was to learn to please and a people pleaser. And it's an identity that I have since am in recovery from because it doesn't serve you later in life. But growing up in the South, there's a lot of rules around emotions as well. You don't hurt your mother. You don't get angry. There's a lot of those types of messages that you are not allowed to really be who you really are. And you become who your parents or other influencers want you to be. So I think a lot of us struggle with that.
I totally understand.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, when I was 19, I was in a very, very horrific, serious car crash that I actually did not survive. And I subsequently had a near-death experience with that, and then wound up being in the hospital for 4 months. And during that time, I had 2 more near-death experiences. And the interesting thing about this is that my memory did not come back, Justin, for 19 years.
Really?
And so I only remembered bright white lights. And that Raymond Moody, who is kind of like he coined the term near-death experience. He said that is the most common experience that near-death people share that have that experience, is this white tunnel or white light. And that was all I could remember for 19 years. And I remember asking my surgeon, could that have been the operating room lights? And she said, no, it's something beyond this realm that you experienced because you were unconscious. And so that piece had always stuck with me, but I blanked out from the point where I got a ride back to the academy with a senior cadet and waking up in the hospital. And I can tell you now what happened because my memory came back. I went back 25 years later and interviewed. I found a paramedic. I found my doctor, who was a maverick. She was the first female surgeon in Colorado Springs, and then the nurse that was with me all 4 months. And I call them my angels. And I believe in angels, and I believe they appear in many ways. And just as I had encountered an angel when my memory came back beyond this realm, we have angels here too. And those are at least 3 of my angels that were put in my life at a specific time to save me. So one of my messages to your audience is that angels do exist, but they want us to ask for help. Okay. They're not going to interfere in our lives because of something called free will unless we ask them. So know that all of us have at least one guardian angel. And the other thing is you have to ask for help. Even a simple thing like a parking place. You ask the angels and it will happen. So start having a relationship with that spiritual dimension, and you can start with your angels.
Awesome. So I'd like to talk more about your memories that you were able to recall after I guess you said 19 years, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. So what do you remember from your indie?
Well, it was interesting because at that time in my life, I was working at the Centers for Disease Control, the disease detectives in Atlanta. And it was just going about my normal day. I stopped at Starbucks, got my coffee, and then out of the clear blue, I could see how I was sitting in this 1965 Corvette convertible. I had one leg up on the dashboard. The other one was crossed over. I was leaning back. And all of a sudden, I started to remember the crash, the exact flying out of the windshield, going up butt first. And it explained to me now how I got the injuries that I did. I had amputated my left foot. I had a 4th-degree laceration between my anal and sphincter. I had severed my right wrist. So I had all these injuries that were like, how could that have happened? But I saved my brain pretty much and my spinal cord. So I remembered that and I said, oh my God, I'm not going to work. I am going to go see my body worker, my chiropractor. And I sat in his office until he could see me. And he said, Nicole, these are repressed memories. And I said, you got to be kidding me. They've been repressed for 19 years and now they all of a sudden decide to come out. And he said, yeah. He said, the body remembers. And there's a great book that says the body keeps the score. And it's on.
Yeah.
Do you know that book?
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar.
Yeah. So if any of you out there have had trauma, it's a great book to get and read and understand how your body remembers everything and stores it. So I finally had gotten to a point in my life where I felt safe, that the memories could come up, that I wouldn't freak myself out and wind up in a psych unit. And also, that I had support, because when you are uncovering trauma, you need people around you and support, therapy. I got into therapy, all this kind of stuff that will help you because it is overwhelming and you need people to help guide you through it and to process it and to unwind it. So that, I think, is why. Plus, I think my guide said, it's time to remember because you've got a job to do, and that is to get this message out. Do not be afraid of death. And it's time to get going on that message. You're not going to leave this planet without, getting this message out, because that's what you really came back for. But what I remembered was when I left the car, I went into the air, and I remembered at that point, my energy body cracked open and my soul left me. And this angel from the other side, that in the book, You Are Deathless, that I wrote, I call him Casper the Friendly Ghost. Well, as soon as I published the book, dadgummit, if my grandfather comes to me, I smell cigar smoke in August of the year before, and I go, what in the world is that? Nobody around here smoke cigars. And then I heard my name. And he said, Nicole, it's time to tell you that I am that angel. I am Casper. And I was the one that came down and saved you and brought you up to the other side. And I was floored because I could remember that the angel was male. He was in his early 30s. And I had the right descriptor, but I never would have guessed it was my grandfather on my father's side. And so the ironic thing is when he was on Earth, he was an alcoholic. And it turns out the driver, the cadet of the car, was an alcoholic as well. And what I learned is that my grandfather was seeing all of the abuse that I was enduring at the academy. He knew it wasn't a right fit. He also knew that in our family, you couldn't quit something. You would be seen as a failure. So the shame and the embarrassment and the humiliation of quitting something, even though I knew it wasn't the right path for me, my soul in this crash actually got me out of the academy because of all the disabilities that I faced. So I now know that part that NDEs talk about meeting deceased loved ones. Now I have that experience. It's my grandfather. So he is with me now as an angel and he said, I will stay with you until you cross the other side. And I was back to the other side for good. So he's still with me to this day to help protect me. And so I do have several angels. Of course, a lot of us have more than one angel. So at that point, I froze in the air. I could look down because now I'm not in human form. I'm in soul form. Okay. That means I'm understanding things through telepathy, through vibration. I don't have eyes like I have in a human form. You have this like peripheral vision. You see everything all at once. Right. And so I heard a conversation going on next to me that were two angels that was what I was talking about earlier, that they were saying they want to help us here on earth, but we have to ask for help. And then my angel, Jane, said to me, you're going to go back and you're going to help others. And I'm like, I don't want to go back. I do not want to leave this beautiful place where there was no negativity, there was no depression, there was no gloom and doom, there was no any of this, quote, bad stuff, okay? It was just absolute beauty, light, loving kindness, unconditional love, peace that passes all understanding. Why would I want to go get back in this mangled body and have pain and suffering and get back to an infancy state where my mother's going to have to help me learn to walk again, go to the bathroom, and be dependent on her? So I didn't want to come back. And he said, you are going to go back, and your message is to tell people not to be afraid of death. And I was like, great. How am I supposed to do that? That is like a huge message. So Justin, it's taken me another 20 years, okay, to actually get myself, it seems like a quite simple message, right? But it's taken me almost 4 decades now to align myself from my mind, my body, my spirit, and my soul to understand what this message is and how to message it to people and why it's needed right now, because we have a culture of death denial. We don't believe it's going to happen to us. And so until it does. And I'm here to say, I did not think I was going to die at 19 years old. None of us do. And we live in a society today that we need to start preparing for death. And we need to understand that it can happen at any moment to any of us at any time, and to start being conscious of that and start focusing on a discussion about what your beliefs about God are, because they shape your relationship to death. If you do believe in God's source, whatever you want to call it. And if it's a dual relationship with God, meaning you believe God is love and light and protection and all these beautiful things, but on the other hand, he's got all these rules. And if you do not obey the rules, you're going to go to hell. And when people ask me, Nicole, is there a hell? I say, hell no. It is on earth, okay? It is not something that's going to happen. And another point, you're never going to be judged on the other side. There's not an old white man in the sky that's keeping a list of all your faults and your thoughts and which ones are bad. It's not Santa Claus. That does not exist. What I really experienced was God, and I was one with God. And in that beauty, in that essence, God is love. Period. End of sentence. There's no judgment. There's no criticism. There's no negativity about it. And there's nowhere that God is not. And I had to get out of organized religion in order to understand what and redefine my concept of God. And nowadays, and it's still ongoing, and I tell people nowadays, it's nature. I feel the most connection with God when I'm in nature, in that element. And I wrote in my book, was doing a practice for several years called Neuro Emotional Technique to help people with their unconscious limiting belief systems. And I had a little 6-year-old girl who was raised in a very fundamental church who was adopted, and she did something, quote, bad. And she thought she was going to go to hell and be separated from her family. Now, to be separated from another family when you're adopted, she was starting to wet the bed. She was scared to death. Yeah. So I asked her, I said, well, how do you see God? And she eagerly told me, God is a blue spirit with colors and balloons and all different colors, no head, and can talk. Now, clearly, this little girl is still having a direct experience with God, no filters from other people. You know, your own experience of God will probably look nothing like hers or mine, but I hope my story can encourage you to continue on your path of evolving your concept of God if it includes anything that is related to fear, because fear is man-made in order to control us. And if fear is running your system, your nervous system, you are not going to have clarity. You're operating from this part of your brain called your amygdala, fight, flight, freeze. Okay. And anytime you make a decision when you're in that sympathetic state, it is not going to be for your highest and greatest good. You've got to get up here in this prefrontal cortex where you're in a parasympathetic state, rest and relax and digest things. And then you can make a clear decision. But so many of us in this country and in the world are running on a fear loop that actually comes from organized religious experiences where we were taught that God is to be feared. And if you don't resolve that and let go of that old belief system and come into a new relationship with Source, that runs your energy system.
100%. I can't possibly agree with you more. Yeah, that's exactly, you know, like we were talking before we started actually recording. That's why I avoid the news. Like I just avoid it altogether. I don't want to see it. I don't like, I mean, I get my news secondhand from other people. Do you hear what's going on? Like, I guess, no, not really, but tell me about it. What's happening?
Yeah.
And half the time I'm like, no, and I don't want to. Right. And it's not because I want to live my life like an ostrich with my head in the ground. It's because, as I said earlier, I'm in the business of being happy. And if we're clouded with fear, if our judgment is clouded with fear, if it's so pervasive because it affects literally every facet of our life, and yes, it's so detrimental to us. And just to be in that constant state of fear and that constant activation, to be constantly in the limbic system of that fight, flight, freeze response is just, it's not a recipe for happiness, and it's not a recipe for joy or success or for love or for any of those things that we all want in life. And it's interesting to watch the way that people will inundate themselves with things that put them in that state and then wonder why they're not happy. It's like, well, look at what you're putting in your body. And, you know, I don't know if they view it that way, but like, you know, you want to watch your nutrition, right? Because if your nutrition isn't good, it's going to affect your body in a negative way. Well, it's the same thing with the things that we ingest mentally. You know, if we're constantly bombarding ourselves with negativity, we're probably going to be a negative person.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And I would say that that's also from energy perspective, because the reality is we're all energy. Yep. And everyone and everything is connected. And we haven't learned that lesson yet in America or in the world. And I hope we do someday, because we are in a very divisive place with each other right now. And it is very important. And what I experienced on the other side is this collective consciousness of our souls are all one. We're oneness. Okay. And we need to start realizing that the decisions that we're making, the behaviors that we are exhibiting are influencing other people. And if the pandemic wasn't enough of a wake-up call for that, there's going to be more opportunities that are going to come down the road where you're going to see that your decision is going to affect someone else. And we need to start getting on the same page about being more responsible and aware and respectful of all sentient beings, of Mother Earth, and each other. Because being in the military and now being a 100% disabled veteran, they always said everyone bleeds red. Okay, we're all at the core the same.
Oh, yeah.
And so we need to get over this division, because it isn't about us. It is about the collective consciousness and the greater good. And I understand when someone passes that we have, the human side of us and we have the spiritual side of us. So we have to be compassionate. There's still suffering, there's still grief and pain and loss, and we need to hold that and help people heal that. But the cosmic context is benevolent and extraordinary. And knowing the true context enables us to live a happier life, and to prepare for our own graceful passing, which I don't think many of us think about consciously, and also to support others in their own transition, because this is the most common shared experience: death. It used to be death and taxes, but a lot of people are getting out of paying taxes. So I'm now just saying it's death. And so we need to start talking about this and to start talking about our soul. I still don't think many people understand what is their soul. And that is an important concept to start talking about, because in the wellness world, when you look at if you just take it at its simplest form, there's the physical part, which is the nutrition, the physical activity. Then there's the mental part, okay? And we need to heal those pieces: PTSD, anxiety, depression. There's the emotions, which we are a very illiterate country when it comes to emotions. Most of us grew up with bad, sad, mad, and glad. Okay. And there's a buffet of emotions, and all of us at some point in our life had to repress those. Well, you're going to get triggered later in life when similar situations come up and you never resolve those emotions at an earlier stage. And you need to do that in order to be free and to get clear about what the belief system is that you're getting triggered by, and that maybe it's not serving you anymore and you need to let it go. And then the last component that we've really in the wellness world never given much credit or attention to is the spiritual domain. And what I didn't know, and what I wish I would have known way back when, was this part called soul loss. So when my crash happened, what I didn't realize, that my soul fragmented. Okay, parts of my soul left me. And how do I know this? Well, there are actually a couple of major symptoms. The first one is I didn't want to be here. Now, I already said when my memory came back, I knew I did not want to come back to a body and a life that I knew would be filled with pain and suffering. The second is this low level, consistent feeling that something is missing. Now, it's interesting to note with this that many compulsive behaviors or addictions can fall into this statement. And for me, I can go back and clearly link between my compulsive eating. I developed, it's now called binge eating disorder. I developed that the following year after my crash because I did not get any mental health help. My mother told the doctor when he said, Nicole needs to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. She's been through a massive trauma. My mother looked at him and said, Jesus is going to be her psychologist. She's going to be just fine. Well, I have to tell you, Justin, Jesus never came down and sat on the sofa and said, Nicole, let's deal with your PTSD, or let's talk about your anxiety, your lack of control over events, and all these things, that your fear, your worry, all of that. Nothing, God never came down and did that. And so your body, if it doesn't get the help to heal these trauma wounds, will find a way to adapt to it. And it's always going to be a negative adaptation. And unfortunately, mine came out in an eating disorder, which unfortunately lasted 20 years of my life. From age 20 to age 40, I suffered with that. And the root pain of that disorder was self-hate, because my father actually blamed me for the wreck. I disobeyed him. I disobeyed my earthly father. I got in a car with a guy who was drunk that I didn't know he was drunk, and so forth and so on. So the third one is I cannot get over it. Okay. You run into people that just cannot get over, like they're stuck with a chronic health condition, and I had this hypervigilance of always needing to keep myself safe. So needing to the illusion of controlling my world so nothing bad would happen to me. So neglecting these hurt, fragmented parts of the soul and just go on with life was what I did until 2019, when I saw a shaman, and he did something called a soul retrieval. And that soul retrieval for me was a powerful healing tool that works. And I needed that to bring in these fragmented parts of me and to sew up my energy body, which still was 30% open. So I was constantly flying out of my body all these years, every time that I would get triggered. And it caused me to stay very depressed, because I had known what the other side was like. And I kept getting depressed, going, look at Earth, look at what's going on here and how people are treating each other. And the murders that are happening, these mass murders, just because somebody decided they wanted to get back at somebody, they go shoot up, a Sandy Hook, these little first graders, it was blowing my mind. So I want to tell people what we're dealing with here is a spiritual hidden realm, and it's very real. And just like you heal a flesh wound, you heal a mental health wound with medications or therapy or whatever, you also need to heal a soul wound.
Absolutely. And there's so much of what you just said that I completely resonate with. I'm a childhood cancer survivor. So I was faced with my own mortality at the age of 13, right? So
wow. Yeah.
And that changed me profoundly, like just the facing my own death at that age is like, it was very eye-opening and very awakening in a sense, and I in my younger years, I experimented with psychedelics and stuff, and through that, had that experience of connection and oneness, and you really see through the individualism of Western culture, right? And
Yes.
I feel like that's one of the biggest problems is like from an early age, we're taught that it's us against the world, and that we are missing something. And as you and I both know, that's like the furthest thing from the truth. Like we're born completely whole. We're not missing anything. But we have this entire industries built around trying to fill that void that we think exists that doesn't actually exist if you can just tap into that spiritual side.
Yeah. And, here's the deal. When we are born, we all get spiritual amnesia. We have forgotten where we came from and who we are at a soul level, that we are these infinite, powerful, limitless, radiant, glorious, and eternal, everlasting beings. And that's the part that we have to come, because we get all these filters put in our lives telling us we're not worthy, we're not successful, we're not this, that, we're not good enough. And a lot of religion reinforces that, so there's all these belief systems that you have to unwind and unwrap, and that takes time. And that's why I say I went from a near-death experience to a spiritual transformative experience. And it never ends. We're going to keep evolving, because that is what our soul's journey is about, is to keep evolving. But I had to have that accident in order for me to get out of this bubble of the religion that I was in, and to be able to go, wait a minute, that's not who God is. And start on my journey to come into a new concept and consciousness and relationship with God, where there was not fear. And unfortunately, that it's nothing external. You don't need anything external to connect with God. We are all eternal sparks of God. God is within every single one of us. But I grew up and I'm back in North Carolina, where there's a real strong belief that you have to go through Jesus in order to get to God. And what I tell people with Jesus is a way shower. If we could all truly live our lives like Jesus did, the first thing is judge not, lest you be judged. Look at how much judgment goes on. And the good news is when you die, there is no judgment on the other side. So here's an assignment. Quit judging yourself and judging others on this side now. And when you quit judging yourself and shoulding yourself, like I should have done this, my children, you should do this or whatever. Should is a shame-based word. Vibrationally, you just go whoop when you tell somebody that. So just eliminate it out of your vocabulary. Get that in your awareness right now. Delete should from my vocabulary. And you're going to catch yourself going, oh, I should have. Catch yourself and reframe it. Okay. Because I want you to replace that with love. We need to learn to love ourselves, which gets back to remembering who we really are at the heart of things is love. And when we all can love ourselves, then we can start loving others and then be non-judgmental toward others. But it's a process, but you have to start waking up. And this is what this time period is about. It's becoming conscious that love really is all that matters and the source of all that exists. That's another lesson that most NDEs learn on the other side. And you're never alone. Okay. There's a whole spiritual realm filled with guides, angels, deceased loved ones, ascended masters that are always at our disposal, but we have to ask.
Right. Yeah. So, what is your spiritual practice? If you have a set spiritual practice, is there anything that you like? What do you do as far as your spiritual practice is concerned?
I try to go into nature and I talk to the trees. I try to appreciate and be grateful every day for something, and start. I text with a friend of mine. What am I grateful for today? And it just reminds me to do that and look at gratitude instead of what's going on wrong in the day, because we get conditioned on what is wrong instead of what is going right. So start focusing on that, putting in your journal at the top. I got this from Lee Harris. What does my soul want to tell me today? Okay. And I did that this morning. I do it a lot. And it told me, that I needed to respond to my father about something. And I've had a real toxic, it's been a real estranged relationship. But he recommended my book to one of his former classmates. I didn't even know my dad read my book. I haven't been in touch with him. So to have this guy contact me and say, your dad recommended your book, I was like, holy cow. He read it and he's actually recommended it. But I had to sit with that. And my soul's like, it's not a right or wrong decision. You are acting out of love and kindness to respond to him. And that's exactly what I did. It was a simple statement in appreciation. Thank you for recommending the book, So I asked that, and you may not get anything the first time. Don't stop there. Do it the next day and the next day and the next day. It becomes a habit, and you have to develop a relationship with your soul, just like developing one with the angels. And it's the same way. I'm a dietitian by training because I went into nutrition thinking I could fix myself for my eating disorder. Well, that didn't work. But what I did understand was a lot of parents, like with vegetables, kids don't like the vegetables. And the parent would only introduce it one time. And then they'd come and say, he's a picky eater. He doesn't like green beans. And I said, well, how many times have you introduced it? Well, we had one time when he was 6 years old and now he won't eat green beans. I said, you've got to at least introduce this 7 times. Okay. You don't do it 7 days in a row, but you repeat the introduction of it. Okay. You just don't stop the first time somebody doesn't like something. So that's the habit you have to start changing. I also check in with my physical body through muscle testing or whatever. What does it need today? Does it need a certain supplement? So I'm checking in with that. I'm always conscious of my energy and absorbing other people's energy because I'm empathic and I'm sensitive. Every single person like you that has an experience with death or looking at that, it transforms you. And I have become more sensitive with so many things, noise levels, toxins, smoke, all this kind of stuff. And as a result, I have to really watch my energy. So I can't be around toxic people. I have to put boundaries up. Any toxic input, I have to really monitor that. And then, do rituals to help me clear my energy as well. So that's something else I do. I'm a proponent of energy medicine, learning about that, learning about our auras and how to protect our energy fields. But this is work that you have to do and only you can do in order to maintain that alignment and that groundedness and that connection with source.
Right. So you grew up, as you said, in a very traditional Southern Christian upbringing. And my experience was very much the same. I grew up in the deep South and, was drugged to church against my will most of the time. And, was told that any time that I messed up, that I was going to hell. And
yeah. It was hellfire and brimstone. And I mean, we had church in the morning, we had it Sunday night, we had it Wednesday night. Somebody said, well, what was the worst thing about church? I said, there was so much of it. And then we're going to two different churches because my mother's Lutheran and my dad's Baptist, that they're in conflict with each other. They both have this God, but in the Lutheran church, you get baptized as an infant. The Southern Baptist, they were dunking you in a tank, when you accept Jesus. And, I just couldn't understand why do they have to have all these differences? If it's the same God, why do they have different rules? It just didn't make sense to me. And now I understand why. It's to keep people coming back because you're in fear and you're looking at them as authority figures to dictate how you should live your life. And what I've done now is free myself from all of that. And boy, it's exhilarating. Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's what really got me into more Eastern philosophies and Eastern religions. I guess I would call myself a practicing Buddhist at this point. And a lot of the things that we've talked about in this conversation, there's a lot of common ground with Buddhist practice. I don't know if you've ever really delved too much into Buddhism or anything like that.
Yes, I have.
So you're very familiar that like the deathless is mentioned very frequently within the Dharma, and that the Lokatura, which is the spiritual realm, is also mentioned quite frequently. It's like, so the Buddha, the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, he certainly knew what was going on, right? Like he had come to these realizations and he had woken up to this and understood that we as an individual don't exist as any kind of a fixed self, right? We're just what he called skandhas or aggregates. We're the mind and the body, and then we are just that leads to making contact with sense objects, which creates consciousness, which leads to a feeling tone, which creates mental formations, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as any kind of an individual self, like that's just an illusion.
Yes. And I think that's why this awareness that we need to start coming into with this collective consciousness that we are all one is so important, because there are so many illusions that we have bought into as a society, as a culture, and one being that death is doom and gloom, and it has this negativity around it. And if you think about even the holiday of Halloween, look at how we celebrate in America. We scare the wee-wee out of kids with coffins and Dracula coming after them and skeletons. And, these little ones get really scared about death. And so the next day, the Latino culture celebrates All Souls Day. Okay, we don't even mention the word soul in Halloween. And yet here they are fixated on the souls coming back and talking and all of that. So it's, to me, the polarity, the contrast between those two ways of celebrating death being one day apart it's like, wait a minute, we need to really look at this and look at revising it. And, I think, my mission now, as in I've created this term, eternality. It is actually a world. An eternality advocate is I'm here to help change the world views, vibration, and cultural misunderstanding surrounding death. And to do this, we have to start addressing the difficulties getting there, which is our fears. So with my book, I really want it to become a book club book. I want people to read it, and there's questions at the end to start talking about death and what your concept is. You will have the most intimate book club meeting when you actually talk about this. And so many people don't do it until after it's happened to someone they love, and they're all of a sudden in this highly anxious, depressed, reactive state, instead of preparing ourselves before, so that when the time comes that we can transition with ease and grace. So there's a fear checklist in it. What could you possibly be afraid of? And to have to really go back and look at what your true belief is regarding God, source, creator, the author of this world, whatever you want to call it, and understand if you're still fearing that you still have some work to do in transforming that relationship.
Right. Yeah. So 100%. And I think that that's so important, is just changing the relationship that we have to death, because I can't speak for, other places in the world, because I haven't lived other places in the world. I can only speak for, the United States and in particular, the region that I'm in. And death is generally, it's this thing that we're taught, as you said, to fear. And I think it's just like not a natural part of the transition. Like that's like you said, it's the tie that binds us together. Like we're all on this conveyor belt, headed the same direction. Some of us will fall off sooner than others, but we're all going the same place. And it's so important to understand that, like, there really is nothing to fear. Like, it is just another part of life, just as birth is a part of life. You can't experience life without experiencing death. That's right. There's nothing but impermanence in this world. The only sure thing is that there are no sure things, right?
Well, exactly. And I think when we can open up this discussion and start talking about the positive messages that have come from research around near-death experiences, it is not doom and gloom. It is, like I said, absolute beauty and kindness and love and wonderment and peace and all these beautiful things. And when you do transition, you have deceased loved ones come in, and you're not going over alone. There are other people that are helping, angels that are helping guide you to the other side. So it truly is nothing to fear. Now, that doesn't mean go out and commit suicide. Okay. I want people to get real clear about that. To have, if they're in a lot of pain right now, work through that. Okay. You don't want to have to come back again and have to learn that lesson. Right. So so I want to put a caveat around that, but I think, we have got to start rewriting the script about death, and we can start with our generation doing this. And I think another thing that is catching on is our generation doesn't want to be put in these retirement or these nursing homes and just left, to watch TV for the rest of our life. We are going to choose to have quality of life over quantity of life. And also making that known. I think so many people, especially my parents' generation, they don't write it down. They don't do the wills. They don't do here's what needs to happen. And what happens when they pass is it's all these things that were said to different members of the family, and it winds up fracturing the family. And some of these fractures never heal. There's so much resentment. I deserve the silver in the family, or whatever it is, but most of it's over material things, whether it's a sale of a house or whatever. So it's so important to get all of this out in the open, discussed, everybody's on the same page, so that it doesn't fracture families.
Right. Have you ever heard of a book called A Year to Live?
No.
It's a book by Stephen Levine. He was a Buddhist teacher, but it's essentially about that. It's about treating, so take, say, this year, starting today, which is hypothetically starting today, treating this next year as though it was your last year to live. And what would you do with it? Would you, bury the hatchet with people? Would you take care of, would you pay your debts? Would you settle, things that need to be settled? How would you approach your death? And there's actually, some teachers, there's one teacher based in Los Angeles, I believe. I think she's in Los Angeles still, Mary Stankavage, who still does this practice. And she'll, people will sign up for this and they will undertake this year, and they meet monthly, and they have this discussion about death in preparation. So it's exactly what we're talking about. It's how will we prepare for this transition?
Yeah, it's so important. We prepare for speeches, we prepare for marriage, we prepare, most of us prepare for marriage. We prepare for so many things in life except death, because we don't want to talk about that being a reality that's going to happen at some point, and, we just never know. And we need to learn to live in the present moment, because the past is the past. Okay. And all we have is truly the present. So to start making these decisions and start becoming aware of how you're living your life consciously, and choosing things that are going to, when you have a life review, when you get on the other side, that you're going to feel good that you did these things, your behaviors, your thoughts, your deeds, because you will have a life review.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And this is one thing that I try to impart to people all the time, is that the contemplation of death isn't anything more than the invitation to live more fully.
Absolutely. And that's what I wanted. That's the final message that I have is to not fear death, because if you're in fear, you're not going to truly live.
Right. Absolutely.
And you need to live forever right now.
Right. And like you just said, the past is gone. There's no point in dwelling in the things that have happened, because we can't change anything. Right. What has happened has happened. And the future literally never comes. And it's this present moment. It's always the present moment. We can't escape the right now. It's always here right now.
And you have to let go of trying to change others. If you want them to see your viewpoint or validate you, or you're waiting for hope that this is going to change, you have to let all of those expectations go. And it's very hard to do, because you're wanting validation or forgiveness or, whatever it is in a relationship with usually someone who's a narcissist or someone who is not going to be able to give you what you need. So give it to yourself and move on with your life and let that go and continue in your involvement on your journey, and let the generations, the ancestral beliefs go.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's such an important message, just to let that go. Let all of the baggage and all of the generational stuff, we have to just let that go. That's going to do nothing but just hinder us along the journey.
And I think we're starting to do that, because kids today don't want their grandmother's china. They're not doing formal dinners, so they don't want the antiques. They don't want their parents' junk or stuff. It's like they want their new stuff. So take that as a message of, you get to create your new reality and your new belief systems and your new traditions. And they don't necessarily, there is a place for traditions, and there is a place for rituals in life. But if they're not working for you and you're doing it out of obligation and guilt, that is totally for the wrong reason. And it will only trigger you, and it will not be for your highest and greatest good.
Again, I can't possibly agree with that more, for sure. And it's so interesting that we grow up like that, right? Like we grow up living for other people. Essentially, we grow up living out their dreams. Oh, you have to do this, and you have to go to college, and you have to get this degree, and then you have to, be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, be an accountant, because that's what I did. And it's like, that's not what I want to do. And I think people are finally starting to wake up to that. They're like, no, wait, this is my life. I'm going to live my life the way I want to live my life. And sometimes that works out not so great, depending on the decisions that are made. but sometimes even those bad decisions, aren't even bad decisions. They're teaching moments, right? Like, because every
yeah. They're not seen as mistakes on the other side, and so we need to quit judging ourselves that we made this horrible mistake. I used to say, oh my God, I made such a bad decision getting in the car with this guy. Well, I later learned from my roommate 39 years later that we had an agreement to ride back to the academy together, and she broke that agreement. And so there was only one vehicle left to go back with. So I didn't have a choice. I was either going to have to walk back to the academy, which was 20 miles, or get in this car with this guy. So, it was like that was the only decision left for me. So instead of making it this bad decision, which is what my dad put on me, I have said it was just a decision, and it turned my life into, and all of our decisions, our paths will go one way or another. They're all choices. And we learn from them and we grow from them. And that's what I have chosen to do with my experience, is to evolve from it, to put out this book, which I am overwhelmed at the success of it. It's written from my heart. It took me 13 years to write it. Okay. So I put myself out there. I didn't write it for my family. I wrote it to speak my truth. And I hope that it really helps people heal. And it's effective in helping them understand that trauma needs to be dealt with. You cannot live with these trauma wounds. If your parents suffered traumas and they did not get help in healing, they have no compassion and empathy and understanding for your trauma. You're just supposed to get over it like they did. And guess what? That doesn't happen. You need to get the support and the help that you need. And there's so many modalities out there that can help people now with this. And so heal that trauma wound and move on.
I find it interesting that most of the people who are like, oh, you just have to get over it are the people who are the most still probably messed up, right? Like, because they've done is just repress their emotions and repress the trauma rather than actually work through it. And it's interesting to me because I have several people like this in my life that have been through traumatic experiences that are like, I'm fine. And it's like, are you sure about that? Seems like you're not.
Yeah. I remember fine, fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. That's what we used to say. But yeah, it's no, you cannot go through a trauma and come out unscathed. You are going to be wounded at a mental level, a physical level, and a soul level. And I think you're seeing this a lot with the sexual abuse, women and men both coming out at what the church did, the Catholic Church especially, but other churches as well. The Southern Baptist was just accused of this as well. So it's happening where, the memory was blocked because it was so horrific. And now it comes to light. And I think one of the worst things we do to people is tell them to not trust their memory, or why didn't this memory come back before now? Or why is it just coming up now? Instead of helping them heal from it and trusting them and moving forward and getting them the resources and the support that they need, and instead of doubting them and judging them and questioning them. Oh, terrible.
So you said something earlier, and it was I believe you don't want to have to come back and have to learn that lesson again. And so just going off of that, do you believe in reincarnation?
Absolutely. This is not our first rodeo of our soul coming in. I also know that our soul can come in it's an interplanetary incarnation, so that we may have lived, our soul may have been on another planet or in another dimension. And we choose to come into the earth to help raise the vibration and consciousness of people. And I think a lot of people that have chosen that have found it a very frustrating experience, because there is so much to, quote, fix here in order for this light to permeate through all this darkness, which it's starting to do. And old structures are starting to crumble, but it's going to take time. It moves at a very slow speed. But I have found that, you also can come in from an angelic incarnation as well. All souls are not evolved at the same rate and at the same level. So, it's coming in for a specific purpose for our soul to get a lesson. And if we don't get that lesson this lifetime, we will come back again, and it will present itself in a different way. and hopefully you'll learn that lesson this go round, but it takes understanding past lives and how that can still be running your system present day if you haven't cleared something from a past life. And it would be really short-sighted of us to think that this short time on earth is our only time in life, in my opinion. And I know going to the other side and seeing this collective consciousness where we're making these agreements to come down and try to learn the lesson and help elevate the vibration, especially of planet Earth, that is something that truly does happen with us all. So, and I think that's why there's deja vu, and you think you've known somebody, or you feel a soul connection in a different way, because we do have soul groups that we're aligned with. And so that's why you may feel closer to someone at a soul level than someone else. But that all exists. And so you do have a soul family. Never forget that.
That's amazing. Yeah, the more people I talk to, there seems to be this general consensus that the earth is kind of the spiritual training ground, so to speak,
Yes. Yeah, it is. And we're all here trying to learn that lesson and to help, like you are and I are, be light workers, bridge workers, and help enlighten and transform with what we can do to this new consciousness where we are all one, and we treat each other with respect, and we treat Mother Earth with respect, and quit dumping all this crap on her. And she's not going to, she's already started to kick back, so to speak, and all sentient beings, I'm a dietitian by training. And when I look at COVID, we didn't heed the warning sign with the way we treat animals. That was the first group that got COVID, was the poultry workers and the meat producers. And SARS is going to come back again in a different way, because we are not changing the way we are treating our animals. And so I think those are the kind of things that if we don't learn these lessons that get presented to us, they will start coming in a more extreme way. And I don't mean to be negative or make you fear more, but it's about waking up and realizing, okay, we've got to do this differently.
Right. No, I totally agree with you. And yeah, it's one of the first the first precept that you take when you essentially become a card carrying Buddhist, so to speak, is to just do no harm to any living being.
Yes.
And that's, at the end of the day, that's really what matters. We will meet our fate, and we will certainly pass to the other realm, but our actions are what resonate and what continue to ripple on into time. Our actions are all that we really leave behind. So, and that's just, I guess, my message to the listener, to be more intentional with your actions and just understand the implications of what you do and how that affects literally everything else.
Yeah. And to be in the present moment and think about the consequences and not just be reactive. And to do that, you've got to calm that the sympathetic system down and get into this parasympathetic. So that means working on your fears, whatever they are. And then the fears bring in the worry. And so you're just compounding it. So I go back to, the original message I was given, not to be afraid of death. Well, it's also to not be afraid in your life and live your life, because there's so much beauty here to be taken in. And that's what we need to focus on.
I think that's a wonderful place to leave it. Where can people find you at?
Probably my website is the best way. I have a contact there, and I have all my podcasts listed and blogs, and it's www.NicoleKerr.com. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and you can find my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and ask your independent bookstore to order it. It's also on Audible. I narrated it myself. Oh my gosh, Justin, I had to go back into therapy. It was traumatic to actually read my book, and then have to listen to myself tell my story. I went, oh my God, I really did I have been through a lot. It gave me more compassion, but it also triggered me in some other areas. So, we're all in a work in progress, but I hope my story can help and be effective for other people. And please leave me a review or contact me if you have any questions.
Cool. So if I have one more question, if you had one bit of advice to give to the listeners, what would it be?
Always remember, you are an eternal spark of God whose soul is radiant, beautiful, powerful, and everlasting. And on the other side, all that matters is love and oneness.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Justin. Me too.